Okay, and welcome to this edition of the Imaginal Soul podcast. And I am really excited for today. I am here with Callie White and Sophie Hunter, and we're going to be exploring, well, a topic that is both so close to my heart, but also so close to the place we are right now in that movement of collective consciousness. So the topic is speaking our truth, reclaiming our power. Wow, even just saying it feels great. And first up, I want to say, even before we get to this juicy conversation, that definition of power, the only way you'll ever hear me talk about it is balanced power. That's empowerment of an individual that in turn empowers other individuals to be themselves. Never, if I'm talking about us reclaiming power, do I mean anything about domination over or power over anyone, anything, any realm. So I want to put that straight in there. I know that Callie and Sophie would very much agree with that. So Callie, maybe first of all, you can introduce yourself and take time to introduce yourself. I think, especially as women, we're so used to trying to say the most concise things. And I don't want that to be a part of this discussion, speaking our truth. So please tell us some of your story and what it is that you're working on, because I know you're working on some pretty awesome things.
Yeah, thank you, Prune, and thank you for inviting me and us. And yeah, very much looking forward to this juicy conversation, hopefully. Gosh, where to start? When I'm asked to introduce myself, it always throws me a little bit, because I think we're so conditioned to introduce ourselves by what we do or what our training has been, and the kind of the conditioned identity of our job in the world. And that's something that I've really done a lot of dismantling of in myself, in my own life. And I guess I kind of see myself as I'm on a journey. I'm here on this earth, living my life, exploring, deepening, curious. I've done a lot of different things. I've done a lot of, I have done a lot of kind of training. I've spent the first part of my adult life in the corporate world, burnt out, left there, and then went into a more the more healing world, trained as a psychotherapist, and that kind of took me on a path of nature-based ecotherapy, if you like, and rites of passage work. I was particularly influenced by the Native American approach and ways and philosophies through sweat lodges and vision quests, sitting on mountains for 4 days and 4 nights with no food and just water, working with the medicine wheel, really understanding their indigenous philosophy. And then, and working as a counselor, working with women, running women's circles, passionate about the inner journey, really, like living life as an inner journey. And it feels like that's the only way, I can live mine. And that I'm always a work in progress. There's always more work to do. There's always more to learn. Just as I think I've I've got it now, and that I think I understand what I'm doing. Then there's another layer. Something else comes along, and that really happened quite strongly 4 years ago, as I went into perimenopause. I decided I wanted to really work through that part of my life, understanding it as a rite of passage. It's a portal, it's a gateway into a powerful phase of our life that unfortunately in our culture isn't recognized or valued. I wanted to really mark it and work it through consciously. So I spent 13 moons, a whole year, deliberately going through that. And it was a transformational time in my life. kind of another thread that was coming through was my own ancestors. You know, as I said, I'd done a lot of work based on Native American spirituality, and through some, you know, beautiful synchronistic happenings, I ended up being sent on a journey to connect with my own indigenous roots. So I was doing ancestral healing work, going through my perimenopause, looking at, you know, having to deal with what was coming up, all the layers every month, more emotional stuff, more stuff from the past, and realizing that what I was carrying wasn't all mine. It hadn't all originated in my life. It was ancestral. And then I got really passionate about history and tracing my ancestral timeline, if you like, all the way back to the Neolithic times and the stone circles and the burial chambers here. And in that research, bumping up against 300 years of witch hunts. And somehow, it, you know, like a light bulb moment, a dawning of, oh, here's the root of this is the root of my wounding, my fear of speaking my truth, of my voice, of asking for help, of, you know, so, all of lots of the things so many women struggle with. And so I kind of deep dived into that a bit, and then was sent off, guided, instructed to, as the next step, to take the work that I'd done out to more people, and which ended up being a 13-month pilgrimage around the UK and Ireland in my little camper van. And part of that was gathering women every full moon for 13 to hold ceremonies in honor of the women that were persecuted as witches. And just to finish, so part of those ceremonies, I invited each woman to bring a silver spoon as a medicine spoon. We used those within the ceremonies, and I was guided to collect them, because they were going to be part of some bigger collective creative project down the track. I had no idea what that meant at the time, but I collected them. I've got a beautiful box of 501, a heavy box, 501 silver spoons. And so then for the last 2 years, I've been working with a group of 30 women, Sophie's one of them, to explore further the inherited trauma from the witch hunts, from the burning times, and to, you know, to clear that patterning, and express that in some creative form, which we're now weaving together into an exhibition which is happening in January. And, you know, I say exhibition, it's more than just come and look at some paintings on a wall. It's a ritual space, it's an experiential event, you know, happening. So that's a little bit about who I am. I hope that answers the question.
That's perfect, Callie. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I think it's really important, as I'm listening to you, I'm aware that what you've shared is really a beautiful exploration of a journey of your life. It's not an elevator pitch. And I'm sure you coming from your work, Sophie, you coming from yours, me coming from mine, we're always encouraged to have an elevator pitch about who we are, you know, make it all into 2 sentences and snappy. And actually, it feels like as we all form new ways of communicating on really sacred levels as well as the daily level. And for me, there's no separation between sacred and daily, but there are different vibrations within it, aren't there? And as we learn the new story that we're all bringing into being, then you actually taking that time to share a little about who you are at those deeper levels is really, really important. So thank you. I really witness what you've said, and wow, I'm touched and I'm excited by it. Brilliant. So Sophie, obviously Callie has mentioned that you're also working in this together, but please, like, really just introduce yourself and share who you are and what's lighting you up right now.
Thank you. Yeah, and just hearing all those patterns of, oh, I can't follow that, I can't follow that. So yeah, I'm here and I think for me the part of my journey has been a split between childhood expectation of this is who I should be, this is who I'm meant to be, and a very true sense from my earliest memory of who I am, not being okay most of the time, and so I guess my journey has been about putting those two together, has been around how is it possible to investigate one truth whilst living another. And I ended up going into theatre, but not just theatre. So theatre, making theatre with community, making theatre for others, facilitating others, learning journeys, playing, lots of stuff around play, and the healing space of imaginary worlds, I suppose. And that was a healing space for me as a child who wasn't allowed to be the person that she felt she'd come in to be. Theatre, I now realise, I didn't have the knowledge at the time, theatre for me was a place where I could test out, and I liked acting, I enjoyed acting, but actually for me it was the whole project and the facilitation, that dream of I want to make this experiential thing happen. And I've largely worked outdoors, I've largely worked in woodland, I've largely worked pulling story from landscape, so really connecting through I guess a combination of theatre practice, rites of passage, lots of stuff around kind of self-understanding, but giving people an opportunity or a space to learn about themselves. And as I've that's what I do, that's my day job. I now run a small charity in Sheffield that encourages that for 84,000 children and young people across Sheffield. And it's that weird thing of getting further and further and further away from core purpose, and realizing, I suppose that for me, the frame of the work that I've done with Callie, of realizing that actually there's a split between who I feel I am, what I feel I can offer, and what is expected of me in the world. So the stepping into my power, beginning to speak my truth, has been trying to connect those two worlds. So I started doing lots of ancestral healing work, and some of that was with Callie, some of that was with another friend here in Sheffield, and realizing that actually coming to an acknowledgement that it wasn't all mine, it wasn't all my stuff that there was to heal. And I suppose intuitively, once I had my own children, really beginning to foster an environment for them, and therefore an environment for myself, where we were all learning to be who we should be. So I don't know how coherent I'm being, but for me it's this the constant battle between the expected world, who I'm meant to be, or who I'm told I'm meant to be, and more and more and more reclaiming myself. And within that, I suppose, working a lot with shadow work and getting to a place of realizing all these stories that I've been told, stories around, power is masculine and is something to be avoided, and authority isn't something that you should go anywhere near because it's negative. And but just, I suppose, beginning to realize that I was playing I'm playing one part in my semi-corporate, kind of slightly softer charity arts world, but I was also doing a lot of internal work. And at the point where I joined Callie's Silver Spoon Collective, what I realized I needed to do more than anything was to pull the two together. And the terror of that, the realization that actually for me, what has been safe is having these different personalities. And the personality that I show to my work colleagues, or the personality that I show to my parents, or the personality that I show to the people who I show my real soul to, and actually realizing that part of my disempowering is the fragmenting of myself. So I guess my journey is it's a personal one. I haven't spent I haven't done lots and lots of work with other women making this happen. It's very much my own story. And but when I joined the Silver Spoons, I just heard about receipt books, the notion of a receipt book, which for me was this incredible light bulb moment of realizing that actually in the past, people handed their knowledge on from one person to another, and being completely gobsmacked. It's like, how does that not happen now? How am I having to work this out myself? How am I in a situation where no one told me this stuff? And so at the time, I wanted to facilitate a receipt book project that all the other Silver Spoons women could be part of. And then I ended up with COVID and long COVID for 19 months, and then went on a huge internal journey to begin putting those jigsaw puzzle pieces together for myself. So I suppose I've ended up creating, in some way, as part of the exhibition that Callie has mentioned, I've ended up creating my own healing book, and my own book of wisdom that I've gleaned over many years, but has come to the fore this year. Yeah.
Beautiful. And explain a little bit more about the receipt book, because I know when we were chatting about it and I saw your first pictures of it, I was just entranced by it. So for people who, like me, a few months ago had never heard of one, then can you explain a little bit more about that?
So a dear friend has just written a novel, which she spent a lot of time reading, the Malleus I can't even say it, Malleus Maleficarum. Maleficarum, there we go. And she was doing lots of reading around, I suppose, the time of the witches, and what was often burnt with women was their receipt book. And receipt books were created by women for women. And when a girl left home to start her own household, she took with her receipt book. And within that receipt book, in the original, not in my version, but in the original version, that would have been medicines for keeping yourself or your family well. It would have been herbal remedies. It would have been literally food receipts. It would have been how to keep your things to do in your household. But it was knowledge and wisdom that was received from many generations. A couple of things that really touched me was that very often women would have learnt to read and write through the reading and writing of their mother or their grandmother's handwriting, as they copied out the receipt book into their own hand, so that they could then take it away, but their mother could also keep their own copy. And that women would have, it was just a known thing. And so it wasn't necessarily a bound book. The ones that still exist are bound books, but they were often held by or created by middle class women, and therefore there was enough money around for those to be bound books. But one of the things I read suggested that perhaps they were just scraps of paper gathered together into a binder. But yeah, how much power and wisdom! What would have happened if I still had 4 generations, even 1 generation? There's one thing in my receipt book, which is I suppose just terribly ordinary. But my grandmother, I have a really strong memory of her teaching me how to make French dressing. Clearly not anything that's going to help me necessarily keep my family healthy and well, but I remember so clearly doing that with her, and I found the handwritten recipe that my mum copied out of her mum's book, and then my handwriting in large pencil saying add sugar, because clearly they'd forgotten that in the list. But that's the only piece. It's the only thing that was handed down. So yeah, so it's been a reclaiming, and I suppose for me, a lot of it is knowledge around living well. So I suppose my version of my receipt book has been how to live well.
It's really beautiful, Sophie, and I love it as you're speaking. What's, I think, really apparent is that that's not just sharing of practical knowledge. It's a transmission of wisdom, but the way that wisdom actually holds form. So, I mean, as that woman would have sat and written, then there would have been transmission of her, not just her energy, but her wishes for the person who would receive the book as well. So really, the one word we haven't mentioned yet is the word witch. Yeah, that actually the name of the exhibition that's coming up is I Am Witch. It's a reclaiming of that word, which has been taken from its original form of power. I mean, if ever a word was hugely disempowered, witch and women would be two of them, in my opinion. So I love that you're bringing that forward straight there, and that so many women right now are identifying with getting curious about that term. It feels like, for me, one of the ways that I work energetically is that things like words, they have a form, they have an energy. And the word witch, when I look at it, when I track the energy of that word, when I look at the movement around that word, then Sophie, you were talking about the way it's like a jigsaw puzzle at the moment. You're looking to put together those disparate pieces of your life and find that way to house all of them. That's exactly what that word looks like energetically to me. There's an immense strength right at the core of it, but it's kind of like each letter is separate rather than it being in its contained form. And of course, our stories of the last few hundred years have done an amazing job at having the witch as the negative, portraying it as the power of woman that needs to be removed from the mainstream of life. So when we've got stories such as the evil stepmother who is the wicked witch, and that disconnection from balance, from bringing shadow and light together, and the incredible balance and equilibrium that we can bring forward in ourselves when that is possible. Wow, so many threads in those two beautiful introductions to bring forward. I think one thing I want to pick up is, and maybe this is to either both of you to answer, is that concept of the receipt book. In other ways of speaking, it would be called the recipe book, but recipes for life. Receipt and recipe are two words that can be interchanged in lots of ways. But of course, we might more typically have an idea that a witch's or a medicine woman's book would be called a grimoire. And that would be a place where there was not just information for life, but also her ways of working with the mystery traditions, with the concept of magic, to help bring more balance into the world. So can we, first of all, let's just look at that word, because I'm sure as some people would have been hearing your story there, Sophie, then that's the only word that they ever would have heard about a book of a medicine woman or man. Actually, let's just put that in, that there were many men that identified as medicine men, witches, shamans. Our old words are so lost, aren't they, around how to sound this. I know for me, the word, I'm a shamanic practitioner, that can I use the word shaman when I describe myself? Yes, but it is appropriation of a different culture's term for this. what does my own language have in that? There are some in the Welsh, there are some in the Irish. The English word that most fits with where I am would be the weleda or the veleda, which of course now we know Weleda as an amazing bioorganic skincare product. And that was the reason that they called their business that, because they wanted to bring that concept of the medicine woman back into being. Medicine woman also working with ceremony, working always with the healing of the elements into that place of balance. So when we're thinking about the word witch, it's a very messy term in our cultural understanding at the moment. So let's pick up that place of witch and anything you want to say about that, and also the place of grimoires as opposed to recipe books or receipt books.
Okay. So where I start with is the etymology of the word witch is, it's connected to the word weird, it's connected to Wicca, the roots of it are in that which was our connection to nature, to the spirit of nature, and our intuitive connection, our understanding, our ability, we're not separate from nature, we're part of nature. And so, in a way back when prefrontal cortexes weren't so overdeveloped as they are now, and there was no maths and computers and science, and and people lived much closer to the land and to nature. I think it was a much stronger way of, it was part of life, it was part of their way of living, it was it was how they were. And the word, and so before the witch burnings happened, the word witch wasn't a negative thing. It was somebody that was working through and with the forces of nature. And one of the words that you didn't mention there, Prue, was the cunning woman. So, every village would have a cunning woman or a cunning man. They were known as the cunning folk. And I think, if you think back then, pre-NHS, pre-GP surgeries, that was the person you would go to. And I think every woman, every man, even, most people would have had a working knowledge of the plants and the herbs that grew around their home, because that's all there was. That's what medicine was. There was no, allopathic medicine back then. The cunning folk took that, how I've understood it is, the cunning folk took that to the next level, which was then working with intention, what I call intention, which back then was called magic. And so it would be the cunning folk that held the grimoires as a record of their spells and their intentions. And then the ordinary women would have their receipt books, and the receipt being coming from the French word to receive. So it's, it was about receiving wisdom and knowledge. So that's how I differentiate the two. Like everyone, most people would have had a receipt book, and then it would be the cunning folk that, or the witches, they might have called themselves, that would have held the grimoires and gathered and written grimoires. And the word witch became a negative thing, or a thing to be feared, an identity that you didn't want to take on, due to the Malleus Maleficarum, which Sophie mentioned. The Malleus Maleficarum, written at the end of the 1400s by a Dominican inquisitor or two, sent by Rome into what's now Austria, with a misogynistic, on a mission to root out heresy and those that were still practicing the old ways. And within the Malleus Maleficarum, which is a pretty hard read, is a definition of a witch, being someone who has denounced God, is in league with the devil, is in sexual relations with the devil, is working to do, the devil is working through her to, she's doing his work. And is practicing magic with the intention of doing harm. And so once the witch hunts took hold, no one's going to want to identify with being a witch, because you're putting yourself in a situation of wanting to be, of being persecuted in the most horrific ways. And I think that it's a huge story, isn't it? The oppression of the words and the energies, and there's lots of other really interesting things that I've come across in my own research, like the word gossip. The word gossip now has a negative meaning. It's like, oh, if you're a gossip, you're talking about negative things you're saying negative things about people behind their back. And and to accuse someone of being, oh, she's the old village gossip, it's something not very nice. But the original meaning of the word, a gossip, was a confidant. Every woman had a gossip. It was like your best friend, and which just, for me, that it affirms that as women we need each other. We're not supposed to just depend on men. We're supposed to be connected together, and that's scientifically proven now. As well, when women are together and we are in a relaxed state, and we're not in fight, flight, freeze, then our brains release all the feel-good hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, etc. So we've kind of, we've grown up together, we've relied on each other, we've trusted each other, and particularly during the witch hunts, our sisterhood was smashed apart. Women were forced to betray each other, which then leads to mistrust and all sorts of survival behavioral patterns that are about, making sure I'm all right. Wounds of separation. I've kind of gone off on a tangent and away from the word, but So this exhibition and the work that we've been doing has been about exploring that and trying to just, to bring through what's happened culturally, so that now, Halloween is all about witches, and they've got crooked noses and warts and pointy hats, and or there's something to be afraid of. It's just like, let's get that out and have a look at it, and reclaim the positive aspects of it, actually. But it's been an interesting journey. It's challenging. Like, we had a group. We met for a weekend as a group, and we did an exercise where we stepped into the I am witch. What happens, what comes up for us if we really feel that in our bodies, because this stuff is rooted in our bodies. We're carrying so much somatically, and it's hard. Like, there is a lot of fear comes up, and there's inner misogyny too. Like, we don't want to go there. We don't want to be identified in that way. We can feel an anger or a disgust at the very thought. So it's a really interesting journey, and interesting just to stand and okay, to just try that on. I am witch. What does that bring up for you? And I think there is a witches revival, very much so, happening that in the culture, particularly amongst young women now. Mm-hmm. You look on TikTok, you look on Instagram, there's millions of posts. It's coming through as a positive way of identifying ourselves. It's part of the empowerment journey, I think. And I think the young generation have grown up with things like Harry Potter, where witches have been, you know, a positive force, and magic has been a positive thing, but that, you know, there's a lot of women in the, you know, mid generations who still carry and feel the fear of persecution around the word.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where that you mentioned the rites of passage of the perimenopause, moving into the menopause. And that's something that is very close to my heart. One, because I'm going through it, but two, also working with so many women in my practice over 20 years and seeing that the way that the hormonal patterns were actually being wired by older patterns, ancestral patterns, that they couldn't find their full expression. And without that ability to find this full expression within the energy system, within the body system, then actually that's when we come up against those real harsh symptoms. They're beautiful ways of initiation to actually help us claim more. But that's a really hard journey to do unsupported. And when I say unsupported, I don't just mean by one other person or a couple of your best friends. When you chat about brain fog or weight gain or all of the other things that can happen during those big transitional times, but it's collective support, isn't it? It's awareness within our entire society of the balance and strength, the different ways that men and women hold balance and strength, and the fact that in every one of us, of course, we have both yin and yang, but there are different dynamics to most of the ways at the moment still that women and men are the products of these big collective societal conditionings, because we both are. There's no way we can say only women were impacted by the witch wound of today. Men, our children. I love, Sophie, that you're working with so many children. I had no idea that was so many. Tell me that number again.
It's 84,000 across Sheffield.
So that's, I mean, so
clearly not personally. But,
yeah. But that's amazing, because of course then right now we've got Callie working with so much of the ancestral, and you're working with the descendant energy. So we've got that amazing bridge pulling through. Sophie, what do you want to say about the word witch and your relationship with it?
What's really fascinating for me, hearing from both of you, is realizing how, for me, the word witch is something to reclaim in a domestic setting. So, and I guess for me, the receipt book is that domestic witch, you know, and there being other levels. There being other levels of working potentially with magic, but the opportunity to reclaim our domestic inner witch, and the stepping into our power within our own lives before we do anything else, and yeah, I think just for me it's that the owning our own power, actually. Just as simple as that, owning our own power when everything in our society is knocking away at that, is trying to eradicate it or to fragment it, or to and so that I don't think anyone had ever really explained to me quite how important home is, home or hearth or roots or where we're from, or you know, even on a basic level, like understanding the plants around you, understanding the location you come from, that gives us roots, that rootedness gives us power. And having spent most of my childhood being kind of shipped off from one place to another, realizing that landing in itself is some kind of witchcraft. That sense of I belong. This is who I am. Oh, I recognize that plant. I know the energy around here. I know the you know, I've got my favorite tree the other side of that river. I've got and I think without place, then that in itself we lose our power as well. So realizing on so many levels the it's the inner witch, I think. It's like, I guess, even if you're traveling around, if you know yourself well enough, you can keep all of those things close to you. But for me, part of, I suppose, reclaiming my inner witch has been around rootedness and positioning and landing and understanding connection and community and all the things that brings. So yeah, domestic witch, I think.
Really, really beautiful that you bring up that place of belonging. One of the things I was very aware when I was working with empowering women towards health is that the ones that found it most difficult to have that sense of belonging, almost inconceivable in their body system, in the way they process their understandings, their energy, was those who did not have good relationships with their mothers. And I really sat with that and I really worked with that. And I kept tracking the energy of it and realized that there was no way to conceive of the great mother, the Mother Earth, that birthers us, that makes sure we have all of our resources. There was no way to conceive of that great mother unless the personal mother had had a role in their grounding, in their becoming, in their emerging. And for those who didn't, then we really had to there was no energy work that was going to work with that. That had to be sacred work. Not that I think energy work and sacred work are separate, but actually those people were the ones I invited to do pilgrimages back to ancestral places that had maybe no meaning for them whatsoever. Maybe no family stories had come down through their family sharing. And yet, as they walked in those places that maybe that they had been born but never returned to, or maybe that they knew a grandma or grandpa had a special connection to, they began to be in a different relationship with the earth. And in doing so, they could be in a different relationship with themselves. One of the things I'm really aware of is that we're part of the amazing interconnected web of life. But as a part of it, then we also have an essential role, if not responsibility, to be weaving our thread in that web in ways of wholeness and balance. And for me, Callie, you bring in that word intention, and that was the different, that magical way of working. And it's that way of the weaver. I really get excited about knowing that as we come into more and more and more balance, more wholeness, as our vibration comes into more relation with the rest of the world around us, the rest of the web, whether it's that tree in the garden or whether it's the stars, whether it's the moon. Right now we're at this amazing solstice energy when we can be connected into just the movement of the world that we're a part of within. It feels like our vibration has the capacity to actually recreate the world that we're living in, bring in those stories of connection. And I know that in our own ways, that's what all three of us are working on. And actually, that's what absolutely millions of people are working on. And that's where I get my strength and courage to speak my truth. So maybe let's explore a little bit about that. Why can't we speak our truth easily? We've mentioned the word separation, disempowerment. There's been the place of misogyny, of being a product of a very patriarchal and out of balance community. The voice of the matriarch alongside the patriarch has been silenced now for, I would suggest, thousands of years. Maybe even since that Garden of Eden. But we've got a long legacy. So how do we step more into that ability to speak our truth and reclaim our power? Callie, how about you start sharing some of your insights with that?
Okay, so my own personal experience of that is it's about how do I source myself? Where do I source myself from, if you like? And that there are a couple of couple of places that kind of had taken me all my life to really understand and find. And one is the what we were just speaking about, what Sophie was talking about, the belonging and the rootedness to the land. So and that was what my 13-month pilgrimage really gave me. And traveling with looking through the lens of the people that had walked the land before as my ancestors, on a collective, like I'm of this land, my lineage is of this land, and so you know, how does then I felt held very differently. And seeing those, you know, because I remember learning about like the Stone Age in primary school, and it felt really disconnected. But what I've discovered of late is that actually I descended from those people. Like if they hadn't, you know, if they hadn't existed, I wouldn't be here now. So my ancestral connection is a fundamental part of where the source of my strength and therefore my power and my understanding of life, and then the compassion and the love and the connection that comes through that. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is sisterhood, sourcing support through healthy female relationships. And you know, we're gonna, and I'm not married. My marriage ended just as I went into perimenopause, which I don't think is uncommon. So I did, you know, I'm living an unusual life in that sense compared to many, but the ancestral work and the witch wound, the burning times work, what came through me was rivers of grief, ancestral grief that hadn't been, you know, expressed before. That it's passed down and down and down through the generations. So I was able to work with that, express that, could do that on my own, was trained in, you know, all sorts of things to give me the resources to do that. Then came the volcanoes of rage, ancestral rage, and then came the fear and the terror of speaking up, speaking my truth, being seen and heard. And it was like, well, how do I heal that? How do I shift that pattern? And it was the guidance was to do what I'm most afraid of, and that was the pilgrimage, and it was gathering women, it was holding ceremony. And what I've found since then is, and this is, you know, we talk about mission, but through the ancestral connection work that I've done, and for me, it's much more than just about my known ancestors, you know, my past parents, my grandparents. Like, it's much more. We've got to go, you know, it's been understanding the whole lineage all the way back. And I've lost my train of thought. That, yeah, the facing the fear, the guy that it was about. What that connection gave me was, oh my goodness, I feel so much different. I feel so much better. I feel so different, so much better. I've cleared all this trauma. Like, we haven't really talked about trauma, and a lot of it is trauma. The more I did, it was like the veils lifting, the veils parting, and it was like, oh, suddenly I can see life and the beauty of life and the potential of life and my place in it, and I'm feeling held and I'm feeling supported, and I'm feeling a sense of purpose. And you know, for years I'd run women's groups, I'd designed women's empowerment programs. They were always great, you know, they always went well, but I never found my flow. I never gathered traction with them. And then suddenly I start to put out this work about healing the burning times, which is the result of a you know, I've gone through my own deep process with it, and like suddenly all these women are called. Like every ceremony I did, more and more women were called, and the resonance was you know, was strengthening. And what I realized was that, you know, in terms of empowerment and voice, it was like I'd found what I'm here to do finally. The things that I'd done before, it was like I was trying to, you know, I was teaching other people stuff, or I was, you know, it wasn't fully me. But this time, right, this is my work in the world now. This is what this is why I'm here, is to share the importance of ancestral connection and inherited trauma, and to clear these wounds of separation that were, you know, the nails in the coffin really came through the burning times, to share that story with more people. And then life, it feels easy then, because I'm passionate about it. I've done my research, I know the work, and I'm doing it from the right place, not because I need something. You know, like I've talked, like we, you know, leadership. I had this thing, I was following the conditioning of, like, to be successful, you've got to be a leader, and this is what a leader looks like. And so you know, I wasn't attracting the right, you know, many people, because it was coming out of a wounded place of needing to be seen and heard. And very different to now, which is like, hey, like I'm completely cool on my own, man. Like, you know, I've got my garden, I live in the mountains, I go walking, I'd be quite happy here on my own. But you know, I don't need in the same way. I've done my work, but I want now to share that. I want to help people. The ancestral work is really, you know, it's like I'm here in service. We're all here in service, and my voice and my sense of power is coming through having found the authentic in that, not what I think I should be doing.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey, isn't it? As you move, there's a lot in there to think about, Callie. And I'm reminded of a friend who talks about the difference between being in service and being in servitude. And that's always struck me as such a powerful way of wordplay to actually help us understand when that connectiveness is flowing through us to create what we're working with in our lives, rather than it being, and I mean, I know I've certainly experienced this, and I really feel that we all will have, when it's just pure will and you're working so hard and you are in as much of alignment as is possible, and yet there isn't that kind of force of passion moving through you in the same way. And once you're aligned with what is yours to do right now, recognizing it might change, and that's totally fine too, in that place of kind of personal emerging, but personal emerging in service to the emerging of, well, this amazing world that we are both a product of and creating. And we want to help create one that is much, much more balanced than our current experiencing of it. Yeah. Sophie, that place of learning to really speak your truth, is there anything else? Is there anything, I'm really thinking of the people who are listening to this or watching this, and what was really key for you? You've said that place of beginning to belong more. Is there anything else that you want to share there?
I think learning to listen to ourselves as much as listening to everybody else and all the voices. There's a cacophony, you know, cacophony of people who are willing to tell us what we should be doing, what we could be doing, distracting us from what we might be doing. And for me, COVID was an extraordinary gift. I had 6 weeks where I couldn't talk. I couldn't I couldn't listen to anything. I couldn't read anything. I stared out of the window and watched leaves unfurling on a tree for 6 weeks. And I've never had an experience like that. And I listened, and I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And about 6 months later, I read what I wrote, and it was like, oh, it was this incredible revelation of my own wisdom. If that doesn't sound immodest, it was like it was all this stuff coming through. It's that, oh, when I stop, and you know, my wounding is around service, serving others the whole time. That's you know, there's a lot of stuff that I need to clear that's around not serving myself, putting myself last, self-abandonment. All of that stuff is what I've been clearing. And the point where I can go, what is it that I think? And taking that time out, taking time away from the louder voices, whether that's in ritual space, whether that's in prayer, whether that's just lying on the ground and staring at the ceiling or staring at the sky. I think we don't listen to our own voices. And I suppose in my work, I'm also finding ways for young people's voices to be heard, because I believe very strongly that the young people come in, they know, you know, so they know what they want and who they are. They've got incredible levels of knowledge, and we place them in systems that removes that or questions it. So I think surrounding yourself with people who listen, but also listening to yourself, is incredibly important.
Yeah, really beautiful. And so often we can be in that crazy hamster wheel of life, can't we? Where just rushing through the to-do list and kind of stumbling into bed and getting up the next day and doing it all again. Which of course, that place of connection involves creativity in some way. You brought forward the imaginary place of play. My languaging for that would be the imaginal realm. And for me, it's that place, the interface between, we could call them the greater realities of spirit, of ancestral wisdom, of the luminous beings, so many different words around those energies of the non-human realm. Let's put it into that. Everything from divinity to the spirits of nature. So we've got those amazing greater realities. And then we've got these kind of functional, habitual realities that we can tend to really just close our world around. And between the two of them is the energy that I would call that imaginal realm. And the more we can reach into that imaginal realm and bring it into being in our own lives, then the more those veils do move aside and we're able to access. I'm really excited right now. I'm working to create a course that the titles just came in. I had a week away last week, a whole week to myself, just being in a tiny little cottage right beside water and lots of woodland and the sea. And it was there to really sit with this course, what needed to come through. So that involves me really being in that ceremonial space, moving into the imaginal realm as much as I can, and I can do that very easily. That's a natural place for me. And finding the information that wants to come into being. So it's different from me striving from that amazing place of rationality or logic, like how am I creating this course? What has to be said? It's much more like what's already moving through all of our awarenesses. What is waiting to be the next place of inspiration for all of us? And I'd been really working with it one night, sitting by the fire. I was actually crocheting. So this is me saying kind of how I weave these parts of myself together. So I'm sitting there and I'm crocheting away, and, you know, crocheting for me can be totally addictive. So I'm sitting there, just a candle on and the wood burner going, and I'm crocheting, and suddenly it's like, the course begins to come in, you know, it's coming towards me. So I'm like, okay, this is exciting, but don't rush it, be cool. So I'm just crocheting, and it's coming in closer and closer. I'm beginning to see the words, see the form, see the structure, but I'm like, I still don't want to break. I don't want to rush into the part of my brain that will start sort of landing it all. I just want to get this amazing energy and feel it in more. So still crocheting until I suddenly like leap up from the sofa, because that's as much as my brain can hold without actually writing it down. And one of the word that came through then was the alchemy of intuition. That's the title for this next course. And I loved it. And I love the way it's all kind of moving in this. Really, I see all of my work as always being in this great big cauldron of creation, the cauldron of transformation. And I'm just happen to be the one in my own life that gets to stir the pot. You know, everyone else puts the stuff in and it's already there and the cauldron is part of the earth, but I get to stir it right now. So I'm just so excited for that coming forward. But that place of the imaginal, so amazing. So amazing to be able as humans to be more than simply the function of life, that we can connect with those plants, not just as medicine, but as beings, as part of life. And that amazing, amazing interplay of all of the energies in the world that actually are supporting us. Because Callie, you're right, there is so much trauma around, so much inherited trauma, personal trauma. And it feels like often the more we look at those fields, those experiences, then the more we see them. And it can be that actually the immensity of trauma can be non-processable. Those rivers of grief that you mentioned, like, how do we help them flow through us? And as well as the witch wound, I've worked for a while with the witch womb, that amazing womb, the amazing place of creation, the amazing strength of our ancestors, the light, the wisdom, the knowledge that pours through, even despite the trauma. Or I also believe there would have been some people that were untouched from that in direct personal ways, and actually they're the holders of strength in our ancestral field. So that's the place of kind of balance, isn't it? I'm really aware that where we put our attention is what we manifest in the world. And so bringing in that place of joy, that place of calling on the ancestors for their gifts that we're simply a vehicle for. Every one of us has inherited countless gifts through our physicality. You know, my children tell me off because I happen to create them with a man with almost black eyes. So they both want my green eyes and the same eyes as my brother and my sister and my dad had, but they've got, you know, the amazing, beautiful, beautiful near black eyes. But from those, when actually we're looking through the eyes of our ancestors, you know, that's amazing. My eyes were a product of the genes, but so are parts of my character, both in their challenges and their strengths. And I really try and hold that when I'm honoring the ancestors. I light a candle every morning. I honor my ancestors. I honor my teachers. I honor all ancestors. So that place of kind of just calling forward their strength so that we can work with the healings as well.
Beautiful. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And for me, I found that it was the more ancient ancestors that in the spirit sense were stronger and healthier, if you like, than the ancestors that came later. And so it's, you know, for me, it's the work is not just about let's just go to the burning times. It's like I've had to go beyond that. Yeah. It's the continuum and you know, yeah, drawing from those strengths and that resilience and the purpose, and the sense that I'm not alone. That's a really big part of it. I'm not alone, and ancestral work obviously takes us to some deep places. It's, you know, it takes us into the facing of death and what that means and where we go, and, you know, finding our own, you know, I think each of us have to find our own individual path with that. But facing my own death was, you know, that was a pretty profound few months. And, you know, I've never done. I would just like to, you know, say that the burning times what's really important to understand, for me, what was really important to see was that they affected everybody, like not just the witches, not just the women that were persecuted. They affected the whole communities, and they turned communities against each other. They forced, women and men that had grown up with each other to have to betray each other. It was a mass hysteria across Europe. It's just described as. And so we're all carrying that, we're in some form, and then of course we exported it. Our ancestors from here then export it to the colonization that happened, and slavery, and so that we are a traumatized race, and until there's the expression, we have to feel it to heal it. But also, what the ancestors really told me really clearly was, it's a collective wound and it requires collective healing. So we've got to come together to do this work, and we're not doing it in isolation. And I think that's what the exhibition's about. It's a place, it's another form of inviting others who are called. If you're called, it's because you're ready. The resonance is there, and we're creating a beautifully held space with different creative pathways that include ritual and ceremony and all forms of creativity. To hold people, to inspire people, to who knows, it just feels like it's going to be this magical, profound gathering, as long as we don't end up in another lockdown.
That's the challenge, isn't it?
Oh no.
Yeah. So tell us more practicalities, tell us the dates, tell us where it is, because I've certainly, when I went onto your website and started looking around, I mean, you can feel the power, you can feel the healing, can feel the intention of empowerment. I think empowerment and healing just absolutely pouring through the site, through the images, and you've got an amazing collection of women offering some very, very powerful transformation work and fun. I think that's also, we haven't really talked much about that. I mean, you've mentioned sisterhood, but that was also really apparent in the photograph of the 30 odd of you, and just the names. I mean, there's so much fun. That beautiful power of healing through connection really comes out in it. So share some more information for people who are listening and do want to be involved, do feel the call.
Okay, so the website is www.silverspoonscollective.org. And the event that we're planning at the minute it's happening in January 4th to the 28th at the Story in Lancaster. And for those who don't know, Lancaster in England is there were 3 really big, well-known witch trials in this country, and Lancaster was where the Pendle witches were held and tried and then hung. So we're deeply rooted into the actual, witch hunt story by being there right next to the castle. We open 10 till 7 Monday to Saturday, so it's a 4-week run, and then we have a daily workshop program running alongside it. And Sophie's going to be running a couple of sessions on receipt books. You might want to mention that, talk a bit more about that, Sophie. And then we have a 3-night live performance, the 20th to the 22nd. So I can't wait. I'm praying that we're not going to be locked down, and if we are, then we'll work another plan, and somehow do it online, or postpone it and do it later, or something. But there are 30 pieces within the exhibition. There's Sophie's receipt books, there's the 501 silver spoons, which are being formed into an ancestral altar, but each woman is bringing a very unique and different piece of her herself, her journey. There's paintings, there's some incredible film, there's sculpture, there's installations, there's some of the pieces are participatory. So it's, you know, we really want it to be experiential for people who come, and it feels like, who knows what's going to happen, but it feels like we're putting a root down, an anchor down, for then other pathways to spill out of it, to share the story of the burning times and inherited trauma, and how we kind of collectively heal that together. So yeah,
fabulous. Well, I have every wish and blessing that this lockdown that is being wavered around doesn't impact negatively. And yeah, it's really fascinating, isn't it, this place that we're all at right now, bringing forward different pathways of healing when the need for healing is being screamed from every household, every community, and variant after variant is illustrating that we've still got a way to go to bring this world that's waiting to emerge. But wow, we're in some pretty messy points right now of bringing a new story together. So oh, beautiful. Well, I'm very aware that we could talk for, well, all 4 weeks of the exhibition, probably. There's so much more I feel like both of your amazing lives and wisdoms can bring forward. And at the same time, I think we should be probably wrapping it up now. Sophie, is there anything else that you want to say, either for your own truths and your own power, or to any message to anyone who's listening?
No, other than, if it's not clear already, each of the women who's participated in the creation of the exhibition has done her own healing work, and the piece of the creation at the end of it is her response to her own healing work, and so the journeys are extraordinary, and the final pieces are pretty extraordinary as well, but the journeys are too. And it's been a real honor to be part of a group of 30 odd women doing their healing work, and being led by Callie. It's been very special, and I hope that many people will be able to come and be part of the exhibition and the workshops.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds to me, and from what I saw on your sites and chatting to you, that, you know, these are soul expressions. And when we work with remembering those individual soul pieces, then we begin to really transform the world soul. And that's definitely central to my mission. So I think that's really, even if lockdown changes the shape of this, I have no doubt that it will spread and find its blessings into many, many lives, because it's so needed as well. All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you. It's been such a joy to have this beginning discussion, and I really hope that your beautiful soul expressions in this work and project that you've put together is met exactly as it needs to be in the collective, as we all kind of find this new story together. And your words, your actions are really key pieces in bringing it forward. So thank you on a personal level, and for being part of the sisterhood and the brotherhood that's bringing it all forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Bye-bye.